Hello, everyone. We're going to give it a couple minutes before I get going. We have a lot of people joining in here, and I want to just give them some time to join.
Hi.
Hello. We'll be getting going in just a minute. Let's see here. Nothing like technical difficulties. All right, we still have people trickling in. Give it just another minute. Give it just another minute. I'm having some brief technical difficulties, and worst case scenario, I will just walk through everything I've put together for you. Zoom doesn't want to cooperate for me today. All right. All right. So I'm having some technical difficulties. While I work on trying to get my presentation up, I am going to get going because I want to be cognizant of people's time. The first thing I wanted to start off by saying is thank you for everyone for joining. I know there's been a ton of interest, concern, and a lot of questions about what's transpired over the last week. For those of you who don't know me, because I know a lot of people have registered for this particular webinar are new. They've not attended a meeting that the Coalition for Adult Beverage Alternatives has hosted in the past. Our coalition focuses on the low-dose THC beverage industry. We unite the voices of hemp beverage suppliers, supply chain partners, wholesalers, alcohol partners, anyone that has stake in the low-dose THC beverage category and advocates for sensible regulations at the state and federal level. I myself, Diana Eberlein, I am the chair of this organization. I created it a little over a year ago, particularly because of the issues that we were having and what we saw with Mary Miller Amendment and in the Farm Bill, and then, of course, the language that followed in the Appropriations Bill. And for the last year, 3 months, year and a half, we have been focused primarily on not having what happened last week. So for a lot of you who've worked with me for a number of years know that this has been a very difficult time, and also, just personally, a very trying time because I care so much about this space. And a number of you know that THC beverage is the only way that I consume THC or cannabis. So as a result, particularly passionate about it. But the reason we are here today is to talk about what happened last week and what the plans are for us moving forward. And I'm going to share my screen now because I've gotten a portion of it to work, which will help me walk through. But every time I go to presentation mode, it does not work. So we are going to leave it in draft mode here, and I will walk through this presentation for you guys. There will be time for questions at the end. Please submit them through the Q&A function, and I will try to address as many as I can. If we go a little bit over, if you guys have time to hang, I can as well. If not, I will try to address all of your questions via email, and a recording of this, as well as the deck, will be shared with everyone afterwards as well. So we'll go through this in draft form. Like I said, I want to make sure you guys can see all of it. And every time I go into presentation mode, it errors out. So here we go. So first, an introduction of the Coalition for Adult Beverage Alternatives. We are a true coalition. We are mission-based. Our focus is appropriations, Farm Bill, and dedicated legislation that helps us regulate this category and give us access to traditional retail where other adult beverages are sold and served. So our primary focuses are consumer safety, consumer education, and sensible regulation. As I mentioned, we are federally focused. We do occasionally, you've seen some of us, some of my board members as well as myself get involved in some of the state, regulation and legislation that's gone through. Typically, we are there as a third party to educate on the category. We do a lot of education. I've worked with a lot of wholesale and retail associations on the education component so that they have confidence in our category and how it should be regulated moving forward. Our principles are pretty straightforward. Because we represent the low dose THC beverage category, we focus on the beverage category and how it should be regulated similarly to other adult beverages. So nothing on this screen probably is giving you guys any pause, because if you're in the alcohol industry, which many of you are, you have seen very similar regulations to this. And we will talk a little bit more about how some of these components are impacting the conversations that are going on federally. But today we are going to talk about intoxicating hemp beverage and what happened with the federal government over the last week and what is going on currently in terms of conversations to move this industry forward and survive the challenge that's currently ahead of us. I also want to provide some comfort. We have a lot of good feedback that is coming from our partners as well as champions on the Hill. So there's a lot of good things coming, but we also want to prepare you for challenges, particularly on the supplier side, that might have occurred as a result of what's happening at the federal level. We'll also talk about advocacy and next steps. So in terms of meetings and things like that, that you will probably be included in and updates you will get from some of your partners. But the key takeaways I want you to take from this call is the fact that, one, progress is being made and a lot of progress. There's a lot of conversations happening behind closed doors. And the reason is you don't put strategy on LinkedIn. You don't always put it in a Slack channel or a WhatsApp channel. There's a lot of conversations happening right now that is key. A lot of things that were talked about over the last week or so, and a lot of conversations and posts that have gone up on LinkedIn, has really been directed at the fact that people felt there was a lack of collaboration and communication between various groups that were lobbying for regulation of hemp at the federal level. I do want a lot of you to know that there was also a lot of collaboration that was happening. For example, Roundtable, WSWA, CABA, HBA, we were all very much involved in lobbying federally, asking for the language to be stripped from the appropriations bill altogether. We even collaborated on a number of letters together where we brought in stakeholders from various industries, from retail to wholesale to the supply chain side and supplier side. We held roundtables with Comer, we had happy hours with Rand Paul, and then there was a number of individual groups that also fundraised for a lot of our champions on the Hill. While it might not always feel like we are united, there was a lot of collaboration happening. And I know it's difficult when something that doesn't go in our favor happens, but the reality is we are all working together and we are all taking those calls now because we are significantly stronger together if we are united in the message and the ask. But we need more. What we learned through the last session was that there were a lot of people lobbying against us as well. And some made very valid points. I don't think there's a single person on this call that thinks that there should be THC copycat nerds products out there for kids to buy, that products shouldn't be age gated. I think a lot of us are very united and aligned in our ask. But we need to make sure that those groups that opposed us, that we can educate them on what we're asking for and see if we can get them to support sensible regulation, because all of us on this call know that a ban will only lead to the bad actors going further into the illicit market, and you won't be able to regulate away the demand. And there is a lot of demand for intoxicating hemp products and THC products in general. So what we are doing right now is focusing on getting the right partners together so we can build the right strategy. That is the key to a successful foundation for us making progress at the federal level, particularly within the time frame that we are given. You will be asked to support how you can. The landscape has definitely changed for a lot of us because of the regulation. And I don't mean just in terms, right now it's actually business as usual in terms of selling your product, but things have changed in terms of financing options. Banks are starting to change their stance, and a lot of it's due to education or a lack thereof, but things have changed and it will change how you can support. And I want you to know that all of us are going to be understanding of that. It's about making sure we know where all of the resources lie and how we can best utilize them to be effective. So you will be asked for support and support how you can, but remember that we're all in this together. And then my last point is keep calm and sip on. I keep using this narrative. Our industry is not new to needing to pivot. We didn't think that we would get THC beverages on the shelves at Total Wine through hemp, but here we are. We didn't think that we would have a 0.4 milligram dose cap, in any future legislation, but here we are. We love a comeback story, and we are very good at pivoting, and we will make it through this, but there is going to have to be a combination of collaboration and patience. So we will get into kind of the weeds of what that means, no pun intended. So first, let's start with what happened. So there was a vote to reopen the government. The vote that reopened the government included 3 bills, one of which was the Agapropes bill, so the budget planning bill for FY26. And that included language that heavily would restrict intoxicating hemp products, including some therapeutic products as well, because it included a 0.4 milligram THC per container dosage cap. Anything higher than that would fall under marijuana and therefore fall under the Controlled Substances Act, which, just for everyone's reference, there are 27 states, I believe, that have a Controlled Substances Act trigger, which means it automatically matches whatever the federal government regulations are. So that is something that's really key, because there's a reason that we're pushing for state regulation, because it will default back if there isn't other regulation in place. But there are more things for us to talk about in terms of what that looks like, but that's part of the reason why there's so much motivation at the state level to still continue advocating for states' rights and to put sensible regulation through, because that will make our argument stronger at the federal level. What was also in this outcome is what I'm considering a lifeline, and it's the 1-year implementation phase. So starting after it was signed on November 12th, the clock started ticking, if you will. But don't look at this as an off-ramp. This is an opportunity for us to impact change. So until that 1 year expires, it is business as usual. You can sell your products, abiding by the state regulations the way they might be. If it's a Farm Bill compliance state, you have obviously more flexibility, but it is business as usual. And it's important that you communicate that to your strategic partners, and also partners that, your banks, your credit card processing groups that might be a little bit confused about where the current regulations sit. Have those conversations. They can be tough conversations, but it's better to have them and be able to proactively adjust your strategy than to have something, have the rug pulled out from under you. And we know that we are hearing about different service providers restricting their services because of the new regulation that still hasn't taken place yet. The other important thing is that there's no carve outs. There's been a lot of confusion. People have reached out to me going, what about a beverage carve out? There's no beverage carve out in this. This is for all hemp products. 0.4 milligram THC per container cap is for everything, and it applies to all channels to market as well. One thing that's very important to remember is this vote was not a vote for everyone to tell us how they felt on hemp. It was about reopening the government. It is very difficult to keep a government shut down and keep 750,000 employees not paid. That is a huge problem. It is something that the government, there's a lot of pressure when SNAP programs and food stamps are not being funded, when military goes the risk of not being funded. Travel was obviously becoming a problem for any of you that have traveled over the last couple of weeks. And actually a number of you did for lobbying efforts and had issues because of the shutdown. With Thanksgiving approaching, you also don't want to see those problems. So there was pressure to reopen the government for numerous reasons. The vote was not, hey, how do you feel about hemp? It was, hey, we have to reopen the government, and here are some packages that allow us to do that. Obviously not the result we wanted, but we can work with that 1 year implementation timeline, and we intend on doing so. So here first, let's start with some positive signals. Supporters and partners are leaning in, not out. In the last week, I've had more outreach about alignment, discussions on what we need to be more productive and make more progress together. Wholesalers and retailers have told us we are full steam ahead, and they are joining the political fight. We have seen hemp and alcohol and retail groups collaborating and working together. Champions in Congress actually started emerging and talking about the fact that they didn't necessarily agree with the regulations, but they wanted to reopen the government. States are pushing back. States, particularly ones that obviously have regulation, built infrastructures like Tennessee, Minnesota, like this is obviously something they don't want to see go away. States like Colorado and Texas are talking about how they are working towards more progressive regulations and don't want to see this die down. On the flip side, we have seen some states that are saying we're going to pump the brakes on putting too much effort into this. We are encourage people to keep the momentum going at the state level. However, for the most part, we have seen a lot of support and a lot of groups step up as a result versus stepping out. And I think that's really key. Regulation has supporters. We know this. Wyden obviously has had a bill that he's proposed in the past and is looking to propose and introduce a revised one with dosage caps and different components to it. Griffith has also been circulating a bill for the last year or so, I'd say. And that those bills actually look very similar. So that gives me the impression that there is compromise and opportunity ahead that may very well work for all of us involved. And then Mace has also obviously been very vocal recently. So we are seeing more and more attention to this category from various partners in various parts of the country. And that can all be leveraged for us to make progress at the federal level together. There will be some marketplace shifts, and these are some things to prepare for. I know we have a lot of suppliers on the call and a lot of groups that were looking for funding and things like that, and there have been some major shifts and things that have been impacted by this. I fully encourage any of you to have your funding partners or other groups that have questions about the current regulatory state to reach out to associations and ask questions if they're interested in supporting efforts. That's obviously something of interest, but also we want to keep these partners engaged because this isn't something to abandon. We still have an opportunity and we are still seeing heavy traction in the right direction, if you will. And that means we will find a pathway forward for intoxicating hemp. And I feel really confidently in that because of the people who have reached out and the conversations that are happening right now behind closed doors. But there are some risks. Right now, we are hearing from a number of investors that they've put some things on hold. So funding resources are down for a lot of groups. This also means that a number of you might not have as much in terms of resources for joining associations or making donations to campaigns or fundraisers or things like that. It also means that your focuses for the next year in terms of events and expansion have uh, have drastically changed, and that's okay. We are, like I said, an industry that gets used to the pivot, so we will continue to pivot and collaborate and work together. Credit card processing and banking services, we've heard from some groups. However, we do not know yet if there is a pattern to how they are deciding who are they continuing to support and who are they are not. This is obviously something very common in the marijuana cannabis side where credit card services or banking services are not available. If you have or run into issues where credit cards or banking services have been revoked or ceased, there are other groups that are still servicing this category and are full steam ahead, including insurance partners, for example. So if you are looking for additional partners, you can reach out to your associations to see who is still active in this space. I would also encourage asking some of the brand partners. We're all in this together. There's a lot of sharing of resources in this industry, which is what makes it so beautiful to work in. Find those partners, work with them, and continue doing business. I believe that we will continue seeing that support. We have not seen much in terms of any issues with traditional retailers having issues with funding or credit card processing or banking services. Typically, this is with brands that touch the plant or are specifically dedicated to the hemp or therapeutic industries, if you will. Other services, other service providers might pull back. This is something we have to be aware of, but this is why I was saying be proactive with your conversations. I think there's a real opportunity here for us to keep our partners engaged and maybe even get them involved in the federal fight, because if this is something that is allowing them to build their businesses, keep their employees employed and not have to pull back, this could be something that is leveraged in a bigger way for the federal argument for why you should keep this open and push for state rights. Like I said, some states are still moving forward, but many might stall. So it's important that while we focus on the federal initiatives, we can't just completely abandon the state. The more state activity we have, the more noise we make around people wanting regulation versus bans, the better for us, because that helps us with our argument to adjust the regulations as they currently sit. Where the compromises might lie. There's a lot of conversations between various groups going on right now. And those conversations are around, dosage caps, form factors, permitted cannabinoids. What I want you guys to know, particularly because I do represent a beverage group, and I know there's been a lot of questions about beverage carve outs and different things like that. We are looking for a solution that works for multiple form factors. We are not at this time seeking anything that is carving out beverage only. And I want that to be made very, very clear, because I know there were a lot of concerns about us not having united ask. And that is going to be one of the primary things that we need to have when we push forward this strategy, is that we need to be united. So I want to make that very, very clear that there this time are no carve outs whatsoever. But there will need to be compromises made, and we will be all discussing that and then moving forward with a number of associations collaborating together on what we believe is palatable and winnable, particularly within the next year. Supplier suggestions. There's been a couple things I've heard over the last couple days and the last week since everything's happened. And this is just certain things that I've heard advice given by others. And I wanted to share because I think it's always good to share this information. We want to see people succeed and get through this year, because I do believe there's a pathway at the end of this tunnel. So a couple things to recommend. Running lean and mean. Like I said, funding changes, opportunities might shift, state regulation progress might shift as well. Our goal here is to sustain and maintain. If we can grow, great, but we know that there's going to be some challenges there. So right now, when you're looking at events, not every event is going to be right for everybody. So look at your markets where you're most successful, look at the channels where you're most successful, look at your budgets and see what holes you need to fill or where you have the greatest opportunity to gain, and be specific and strategic with the events. I think that there's so many events. I mean, I spent half the last year traveling, if not more, to a lot of these events, and many of them are very good. However, they're not necessarily meant for everyone, not at every stage of the industry. So evaluate your company, where you're at, where you can win, and focus on those opportunities. I've always said narrow and deep. Prove where you can win. Where you can win will show partners in the future that you are investable, that you can prove how you can scale your product, prove that you can sell, whether it's through convenience or liquor or grocery. Pick a lane and pick your states and push. The other thing is teamwork. I can't believe I'm going to say this. Teamwork makes the dream work, but it does. And our industry is great at that. We share a lot of resources. Speak to your partners. Talk to them about the current landscape. Make sure they understand the 1-year implementation timeline and that they don't think it's already been enacted. Talk to your wholesalers, talk to the retailers, understand what their strategic plans are, how they're evaluating this. Talk to them about how, or if they are advocating on behalf of the category, or if they're interested in advocating for the category. Many of their associations at the state and federal level might actually already be advocating for this category. And as a result, they have a channel in which they can show additional support. Collaborate with other brands. We've seen this a lot, especially in the last couple of years with the expansion into other states. Sharing resources like sales reps, going in together and sponsoring different things together, sharing your marketing spend. Those things can be very effective at allowing you to sustain and maintain your space, but maybe keeping some of those funds a little bit back so you can prepare for other opportunities. It's going to be important that we protect ourselves as well as fight this federal fight. So I just really want to make sure that everyone knows that everyone in this space is very collaborative. There's no shame in reaching out and asking for help. You will probably be met with, I've been waiting for someone to ask me for this. So reach out to your partners, reach out to your brands. A lot of us are part of different associations that have either Slack channels or newsletters, or you can reach out to their leadership and they can put you in contact with different people. There are ways to connect with others. Utilize them. The time is now to be sharing those resources so that we can continue keeping these brands moving. What we learned from this last experience. So there's a lot of things we can do better. And I want to make sure that it's clear that there are a lot of things that we did very well, but maybe at the 11th hour. And candidly, I think there were a lot of us because the landscape changed so much over the last year. First, it was in the House and the Senate in terms of the Harris language. Then it was stripped from the Senate. So a lot of us then said, okay, let's strip it from the House. And then, the last few weeks, we were hearing a lot of mixed messages on where this was going. Was restrictive hemp language staying in? Was it out? Was there a dosage cap? Were there carve outs? We heard all sorts of different things. What we need to do better is make sure, particularly with the timeline that we have, this 1 year timeline, is make sure there's an incredibly clear call to action, that all of us are aligned in what we're asking our partners to do. What are we asking the congressmen to do when we need their help and that we need them to be supportive at the federal level? We need to be united in our advocacy. All of our groups working together was very effective, and I think made a really big splash on the Hill at the end of uh, this last session, if you will. We got a lot of support. We had bipartisan support with a letter that had 27 congressmen that signed it, that was led by Comer. We were making a very large impression. The fact that hemp was even in the conversation with keeping the government from reopening is actually unbelievable, that we made such a big, we created enough friction and awareness about our issue that people had decisions to make, and tough decisions. Consistent grassroots and media efforts. I've been working on this issue for the last year. I tried really, really hard to not create fire drills. Maybe that was wrong on my part, and I should have been louder for longer about the fact that there were risks. I think we have, and we still have, a lot of positive reinforcement and support behind us, which we will be leveraging moving forward. But consistent grassroots and media efforts about the threat, and making sure that the groups at the state level, as well as wholesalers, retailers, all sorts of different partners, know that these issues are outstanding and this is problematic. This can mean loss of jobs, loss of tax revenue, loss of just access to safe products. These sorts of issues need to be maintaining space in the top media spots. And so what we're doing right now has been amazing. So congratulations to a lot of you. There's been a ton of great media covering this issue, and it's amazing to see the support that we are hearing from consumers all the way through to retailers that are saying, we want this to stay, and we think that there is a sensible way to get to that end result. I mentioned this earlier, but alcohol and hemp are obviously collaborating very closely. That's been evident for the last, definitely the last few months or so. But WSWA, the Wine and Spirits Wholesaler Association, has been one of our loudest advocates federally, representing this category and advocating for it for the last 2 years. We anticipate that we will be bringing more large associations, more traditional business associations to the table, asking for sensible regulation as well and working with us. But it's important that you guys know that there's a lot of collaboration happening there. And what's great is we are listening and respecting each other's intel and the information that is being shared. I think that is one thing that might not have been done as well over the last few months because there were so many mixed messages. People weren't sure what to believe and what not to. But the reality is we all have different relationships. The alcohol industry has a lot of political capital, same with tobacco, a lot of political capital. They've lobbied for decades. They've fundraised for a number of people in the government. And as a result, they have relationships. They get different intel than some of the hemp community does. So we need to make sure we listen to each other and we take all of the relevant information and we dissect it and find the patterns and find the pathways forward through that. So listening to each other is going to be critical for us to be successful moving forward. I do think there's a lot of noise. I don't think anyone disagrees with me on that, whether it's through a Slack channel or LinkedIn, the media, there's a lot of noise. It is hard to read through the clutter. And I think all of us could be better at just making sure our call to actions, and this is, more so on the association side, making our call to actions clear, making sure that rumors are dispelled as quickly as possible, and controlling the narrative better. So mitigating rumors or any misleading information. There was some information that was shared on LinkedIn that made its way all the way to the White House because it confused so many people that the White House was actually asked, is this true? And it was not true, that particular thing that I'm referring to that we don't need to dig into. But when that sort of stuff makes it to the White House or makes it to McConnell's office or Rand Paul's office, and they're going like, where did this come from? it doesn't make our industry look great because we are the new kids on the block. As much as Roundtable's been on the Hill for, I believe, a decade. Same with NCIA and a number of other associations. But our issue and how prevalent our products are, particularly beverage, is new for a lot of people. They're not necessarily particularly familiar with what these products are, how they're manufactured, where the supply chain comes from. And so when there's a fire drill or something that makes a lot of noise and it's proven to be either misleading or false altogether and maybe fabricated from someone in the industry, that causes a lot of harm. And then we have to rebuild that trust and figure out how to do so. Now, I believe we are, again, on the right track because we have a lot of partners collaborating and working together that are singing the same tune. And that will be helpful. But it's important that we keep that in mind, is that before we, spread rumors like wildfire, let's confirm the information, listen to each other, respect each other's feedback, and make sure that it's coming from credible resources. There's a lot of, it's just very easy to play a game of telephone. I've been guilty of it too. I hear something and I'm like, oh my God, and I'm looking it up and then I'm like, wait, this article's from 3 years ago. That stuff happens, and it's not because anyone is trying to create anything bad or being malicious. It's what happens when the industry is very eager to see progress and move forward with something. Um, Top three concerns that I'm hearing from industry partners and allies, and this is just this week: state litigation negatively impacting the federal fight. State litigation's hard, and here's why: because there's obviously, various levels of state regulations that have made things very difficult. You have states like California that have a ban. You've got states like Minnesota that have new regulations that are heavily restrictive, um, to the existing infrastructure for hemp that's been very successful there. You have Tennessee, who has very high dosage caps in comparison to most states, but has litigation against it over direct to consumer. What the number one thing I hear about at the federal level is people say they want regulation, but the second regulation is implemented or passed, we are getting sued. And that leads us to believe that maybe you don't want regulation. So we have to be very careful about what our actions are saying and if they align with our words. Particularly right now, because everything happening at the state level is trickling up right now to the federal level. If a governor or a state legislator or congressman in Tennessee really wants to keep this open, and they're fighting for it, and then someone else goes, well, aren't you being sued for it? It's very difficult for them to navigate that space. It also puts us on the defense instead of offense and saying, hey, look, we've put regulations through. Utilize this. We'll build on it over time. It's progress over perfection. But if we are not careful about how we step here, we might actually do ourselves more harm than good. And those litigation conversations are coming up not only in meetings on the Hill, they are coming up with associations that we are trying to talk to about working with us. They're like, look, like, we don't want to touch that. We don't want negative attention towards our retailers or towards our wholesalers. It can be really difficult. And I've heard from numerous groups that, if a brand or if an entity creates negative attention in any way to the category or to their product, they're like, we're less likely to carry that product because we're already maybe operating in some gray area. We don't need to bring more attention to us because a regulator, if they want to find something wrong with something, in the space, they can. And we need to work with these regulators moving forward. We should be looking to collaborate with them, not sue them. So we need to be very careful that our actions and our words align. The other piece we've heard about is with health and wellness. So health and wellness is it's tough because we work in the hemp industry, and the cannabis plant has cannabinoids that are very much focused on health and wellness. And then we have cannabinoids that can be utilized perhaps in some health and wellness products, but typically the products being created that have THC in them are being positioned as products that are being sold for recreational use. So if you have a product, and I represent the beverage category, and I know there's a lot of different categories on this call, but if I represent the beverage category, which is selling these products to be an alternative or another option to adult beverages like beer, wine, seltzers, and spirits, and they want their products sold everywhere where those products are sold, and also sold, let's say, at the beer garden, at the music festival, that's adult rec. they don't want to hear that that's a health wellness product, health and wellness product. We have to be very careful that we are transparent about the intent of our products and where we want them. The other thing that we have to be careful about, particularly when I'm speaking about this, I'm talking specifically right now about the THC beverages pieces, because we are hearing this a lot. Health and wellness is being used a little bit too loosely, and that will put us in a very different regulatory channel with very different aisles of the grocery store that you will end up in, or in different retail partners altogether. So we need to be very careful with how we position our products, because it's confusing the partners, and it's actually in some cases becoming a little bit of a deterrent as to whether or not they want to work with these products, because they find it confusing how they're being positioned. So health and wellness products definitely exist in the hemp and cannabis industry. There is no doubt about it. But we have to be careful about how we define that. And that's something that hopefully we can all do together, because right now there's a lot of mixed messaging, and it's creating confusion, and it is hurting some of our health and wellness partners that are selling supplements and are utilizing these products in different channels. That confusion is impacting them as well. So we need to be very aware of how that phrase and where that phrase is used. And we also need to be very careful about health claims. This is something we've been really adamant about from the get-go, particularly because our positioning has really been to promote these products as an adult recreational product, that they are, that's being sold in traditional retail channels. But it is absolutely paramount that right now, while there is gray area and a lack of data and research, that we stay away from health claims. It negates a lot of credibility that our industry has actually gained in the last, couple years, since these products have become more prevalent. So we have to be very careful about how we use these terms. And again, it's going to be different for every brand. I know we have a lot of different categories and groups that have joined this call. It's imperative that we are just cognizant of what our product is and very transparent when we look at pathways forward from a regulatory standpoint. Lack of collaboration and strategic action. This is a concern that's come from hemp, it's come from alcohol, it's come from retail, it's come from wholesaler. We are working on this. This is the number one thing we are doing right now, is collaborating. And the hardest part about this is that it takes time. Getting the right partners to the table, talking about what that action plan is, it takes time, but it is happening. So I want to give you confidence in that. So let's talk a little bit more about advocacy and what the next steps are there. So first of all, the media, keep it up. This has been really, really great. And as I mentioned, we do have to be careful about the health and wellness claims and how these products are being positioned. Every article is going to be different. So depending on the products they're talking about might have a different position, and that's okay. But keeping the awareness up on how problematic this language is to this industry, to public safety, to jobs, to the American innovation story, keep that up. It's getting a ton of attention, and the right kind of attention. Relationship with alcohol. This, obviously, I represent the beverage category. We work very closely with the alcohol industry. A number of things we hear about a lot is alcohol bashing. So putting down alcohol, about how hemp and cannabis as a whole is better than alcohol. First of all, alcohol is not going away. Also, for sometimes I'm speaking for myself here. Last Wednesday, I needed a drink, and I chose vodka over a THC beverage that night. Alcohol is not going away. The experience and the desired effect has always dictated what the active ingredient is, what the beverage is. If I'm at a baseball game, I get a beer. If I'm out with my girlfriends, we split a bottle of wine. If I'm at home, watching a movie on a Tuesday, or really stressed and maybe I just don't want to talk to anyone else, THC beverage hits the spot every time. We need to respect each other. We're looking to work together. We need to make sure that we are being respectful. Are some of these products a healthier alternative from a calorie standpoint and various other reasons? Sure, but we don't need to put down alcohol in any capacity, particularly when our strategic partners are selling alcohol, and alcohol is still a majority of their sales. So we need to be respectful of that. So I caution everyone. The other thing I'll mention is our alcohol partners can see, they have access to Slack channels, they have access to WhatsApp channels, they work with associations that work with our associations on the hemp side. They see a lot, they hear a lot. They will make strategic decisions based on what they see and hear. So if you are a brand and you are commenting in anything and you say something negative, be aware of who can see that. And if that could be something that is used against you later when you were trying to negotiate a contract for distribution or retail, these are things you need to think about. Be careful with your verbiage. If you refer to something as gas station weed, gas stations might not want to work with you. So just be careful and cautious about the verbiage that you use. Be careful about the relationship with alcohol. They are some of our biggest allies right now. And they've been incredible partners to us, particularly over the last few months, working with a number of hemp groups. So being respectful, listening to them, and acknowledging them is important. Does not mean we're saying we're going to get steamrolled by alcohol or tobacco. That's not what I'm saying at all. We are looking to work with them and make them a strategic partner of ours. They are working with us very collaboratively, and we want to maintain that. So please be careful about the verbiage and the language that is used in, day-to-day communication, various platforms, and obviously the media as well. Also, a lot of your partners work very heavily with alcohol partners, so keep that in mind. That there's a reason they might make decisions one way or another, and it might be because of some of the alcohol influence as well. State. So there's a lot of call to actions. Contact your congressman. Make sure they are aware. One thing right now is because the dust is still settling from what's happened at the federal level, there are a lot of questions about what the call to action should be. Right now, I think it is fine for there to be awareness campaigns where the congressman is being made aware this is problematic in our state because of X, Y, and Z. Keep that awareness up because bills are going to start getting released and solutions and alternatives to what's happened in FY26 will be brought to light. And them being aware of the issues and how it might negatively impact their state, the way the language currently exists, is going to be important for them to back any stance that they take moving forward. So state impact, jobs, business impact, public safety, those things are all going to be top priority for them to understand. We want to keep the friction and the momentum high. Those grassroots efforts are important. However, as we are building these strategies and for the big federal push, and again, we're working within a limited timeline, we are going to have very specific call to actions once that plan is devised. And it doesn't mean that the traditional contactor congressman make them known aware that you want this category to, or you want this industry to survive. Doesn't mean that that call to action goes away entirely. Those are great call to actions for the consumer. But you as a business person or someone working in this space, we might have a different call to action for you or your investors or your strategic partners. So there might be a different call to action just based on your role within the industry. The other thing is we support state rights. So I brought this up earlier. Stay invested in state regulation. Keep educating. Keep working with your state regulatory groups. If you have regulation already pushed across, work within that framework. Keep working to improve upon it. There's a lot of support at the state level to continue working on that. If groups are slowing down because they're like, we don't really know where this is going to sit, so we're not sure if we're going to move forward with this coalition, continue applying pressure. If some groups aren't going to move forward, see if you can find other allies that are willing to move forward with you. We are hearing from more and more state organizations right now that are looking for places to support state level coalitions now more than ever, because now they understand how the federal impacts their current market. So if you might lose one partner, you might gain two or three. So just keep the pressure being applied. The more states with or seeking regulation, the better for us at the federal fight, and obviously the better for the states in terms of creating pathways forward for safe access for consumers. So let's talk about this federal landscape. Things to consider regarding the timeline. So we have 1 year, less than 1 year now, because it was signed on the 12th. Things that have been floated that I've seen on LinkedIn, I've seen in media, I've seen all over. One thing we have to keep in mind is what can we get done in a 1 year timeline? Is that enough time to get a bill across? Are there other options out there? Are there extensions? Are there studies that we can propose? What compromises meet the policymakers' needs? What allies do we need? Can we get them? Which ones can we get? Which ones can't we get? Who's against us and why? Because those are all going to be things we need to address quickly and see change within the year to overcome the challenge ahead of us. There has been a resounding request for a united front, which means we need to take the time to develop that strategy. We can't move the goalposts every month. The call to action has to be consistent. We need to unite, define, and commit to whatever that strategy is. That's what we need to commit to, and we need to stick to it and work on that together. So the unite piece, as I've mentioned a couple times, the dust is still settling. Pathways forward are emerging. Partners are emerging. There are coalitions forming, and very strong coalitions. There are calls being scheduled with groups that lobbied against us, that we think we might be able to find compromise so that we're all working and rowing in the same direction moving forward. There's a ton of meetings and a ton of calls. My phone has rang at least 15 times since this call has started. We need to agree on alignment. We need to agree on who our partners are. We need to recruit more partners. And then we need to outline what is our strategy and what resources do we have? What resources do we have access to? Who's the best to tackle one issue versus another? Who has relationships in Kentucky versus Texas versus DC? All sorts of things. There's also a lot of new groups. A bunch of new people or new organizations have registered on the Hill. A bunch of independent brands have hired lobbyists on the Hill. It's great that we are seeing so much interest in wanting to support the industry. It's important that we figure out how to corral and collaborate together with all of those new pieces, whether it's new groups or lobbyists being brought on by other partners. I have a number of brands, for example, that reached out to me and asked if they could speak to my lobbyist about who they should hire as their lobbyist. Absolutely. I'll do that all day, because that means we're going to see way more collaboration. We're going to make sure we have relationships in the White House, relationships in ag, relationships in the House and the Senate. We're going to have relationships all over because we're coordinating as needed. Not all lobbyists are the same. They vary in terms of duration and experience on the Hill. They vary in terms of what their experience is and where the relationships lie. There's a lot of differences, but they can work together very, very effectively. And that's what they do. I work with a number of groups that have multiple lobbyists. My association, my coalition has multiple lobbyists. We have two firms, one that focuses on House and Department of Ag and appropriations, and one that knew alcohol really well and was a top 10 lobby firm. We did that on purpose. That was strategic. And a number of other groups do the same thing. The hardest part about this, and it's the hardest part for me, is the patience piece. The dust is still settling. A lot of people are navigating. A lot of people are learning. A lot of the calls that I have right now, people are like, what are you hearing? What are you seeing? Can we do this? Is this an option? That's all happening right now. And it's only been a week since all of this has really officially gone down. And it doesn't feel maybe like there's been a lot of movement because it's not being posted everywhere, and it can't be because strategy doesn't belong on LinkedIn. But the key meetings are happening, and I want you guys to know that. They're happening, and strategy is going to evolve from that. That's going to be incredibly impactful. And the strategy is going to require the commitment that I mentioned, and it can't change every week. So we can't move forward until we have in lockstep who are our partners and what resources do we have and how do we utilize them most effectively. And I can tell you there's a number of strategy meetings once we get these allies all corralled and working together. There's already timelines in place for specific strategy meetings in DC for these groups to meet and map it all out. In which case, a number of you on this call will then get the call to actions of how you can support. Same game, new strategy. It's not really a new strategy. It's a new mindset. Someone said this to me the other day, and it changed a lot for me, but I thought it might be something really helpful to share with some of you who are not necessarily, I mean, most of you who know me know that I'm not someone who started in politics. I ended up in advocacy and lobbying on behalf of this category for a variety of reasons. So this analogy really changed how I looked at the game we are playing. Someone described politics as Monopoly game and how you lobby on the Hill and how hemp has been operating. They basically said hemp has been operating like chance. We land on chance and we hope that we get the advance to go card so we can just go and collect $200 and keep selling our product. The reality is we all know how Monopoly is won. It's won by buying properties. Buying properties means consistent investment on lobbying. It means supporting campaigns of those who are running for office, building those relationships with those offices so that when you need to call in a favor, you can call in a favor. it means a lot of things. I also happened to pull this image and it said you can't move forward staying in the same place. And I thought that's just a coincidence, but it's kind of timely. We need to change our mindset with how we look at participating at the federal level. It is about campaigning. It is about doing education. It is about all of the good foundational stuff. It's also about bringing dollars and resources to the table, connections, political capital, resources, wherever you can. And as I said in the beginning, I know that for a lot of you on this call, funding situations may have shifted. So you might not have the same resources available to you that you thought, but that's okay. There's other ways you're going to be able to support and participate in these things, whether it's at grassroots or other. But it is important that we get into our minds that we need to invest in this and find partners that are willing to invest in this with us. And that's in buying properties, if you will. Coalition strategy. And like I said, this is something, the still work in progress part. So the playing Monopoly piece, the buying the properties is a big component of the define and commit. So the strategy that's currently being built right now, these are kind of the basic components, and it's where we are. We need to define the ask. Basically, what's the goalpost? One of the pieces of feedback we got during the last piece or last session was that we didn't define what we wanted, or it kept shifting because the landscape kept shifting. And there's no guarantee that the landscape won't shift a little bit to where our ask changes. But we need to be all singing the same tune for the same duration of time. And I think there are a lot of groups and a lot of new groups entering the Hill. And if we can all collaborate and identify these partners that we're working on together, the strategy and the piece will come together. And you guys have all heard the phrase, our industry loves to use it. This is chess, not checkers. This is, we are playing a game within a 1-year term right now because of the current language, but this is also part of a long game strategy. So our relationships now can dictate who our relationships are in the future as well. We need to evaluate all the opportunities. There's a lot of things being floated out there. Is the right thing to try and push a bill across in a year? That's really hard to do. Is the right thing to see if we can get a study proposed? Are there champions that can help change the language in FY26? There's a lot of different suggestions out there. Until we know all of the players, what they all want and need, and then use that to address the concerns that we're hearing on the Hill, the strategy is still being molded. It's still being crafted. But once it is crafted and we map all our resources and we figure out exactly what we're looking to do to be most effective, we are going to execute and we are going to commit to that execution. And I believe we will be successful. What we need to do first is get that definition locked in terms of what we want and what we're going to commit to, and then roll that out universally amongst our groups. So how to support? I know a lot of people have this question. I start with, join an association or coalition. Here's why. A lot of these groups are experienced. They've worked on the Hill before. They have relationships. Some of the newer groups have excellent hires. They have people who have very good relationships on the Hill. So just because a group is new doesn't mean that they don't have a good position or can make an impact. They absolutely can. But what you're going to want to do when you're looking at an association or coalition is really evaluate who aligns with your mission. And I'll go over that on the next slide. But with your association or coalition, your dues are going toward their mission. Not everyone can afford to hire a federal lobbyist. Typical federal lobbyists are, $15K a month, sometimes more, sometimes less. But it varies again with what they're being tasked. And I think there's a lot of opportunity here, but not everyone can afford to hire a federal lobbyist, which is where an association or coalition can make the most oftentimes of your dollars. The other thing that you can do, like I said, also, I should point this out one more time. If you do hire a federal lobbyist and you are aligned with some of the associations out there, more representation, the better. Keeping our messaging and efforts consistent and aligned is going to be key. So if you are part of an association or you want your lobbyist to work with an association in some capacity, there's definitely room for that. And don't hesitate to reach out to me if you have questions on that. There's certainly opportunities for that. And my lobbyists, as well as some other groups' lobbyists, have made recommendations for good lobby firms or representatives that know the space really well. So if you're curious about that, don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'm happy to provide more info. The other thing you can do is collect, prepare, and leverage your resources. So many people on this call have investors with really great resources. many and good connections and relationships, or other businesses that have established relationships. Um, they might have political capital. Again, they've campaigned or raised money for a particular group. Um, they've You might be able to pull dollars together for donations. Again, that's going to vary by brand. There might be fundraisers or different events that you can go to, super PACs that you could fund. And then there's grassroots support, as we've seen for the last few months, to bringing attention to the issue at hand, getting media, getting letters from consumers, all of that stuff helps support the overall initiative. But collecting, preparing, and leveraging your resources is going to be key, so that when your association or your partner reaches out and goes, hey, I need help, I need to do blank in Kentucky, we know we have someone in Kentucky. We know we have someone in Massachusetts or Colorado. Those things are going to become important. And then the last thing I'll say, and kind of then I'll try to answer as many questions as I can before everyone jumps. Evaluating association or coalition. Of course, I represent a coalition, and if you are in the beverage space, I would love for you guys to be a member, and I'm happy to have calls and talk about what that looks like. But what I want to focus on this call is finding an association and coalition that works for you, because everyone on this call has a different background. You're going to want to review their mission and check the alignment. There are going to be groups that don't fully align with CABA because they have gummies or they have other form factors, and that's okay. Check who those groups collaborate with, who they align with, who they're talking to currently. Look at their policies, look at their past activity. Ask for a call with their leadership, ask to speak to a member, or reach out to a member or a board member and just ask for a phone call. Understand their structure. Where did their dues go? How is their board set up? Communications updates. How do they communicate with their members? How involved are all of their members? There's candidly a lot of people who are members of these groups are not going to be involved in the day-to-day. The board members might be in some of the committees. Obviously, groups that have committees, they might have some, activities happening on a bi-weekly or weekly basis. But keep in mind that a lot of the reason that you are joining an association or coalition, particularly for a federal fight like this, is so that your resources are going towards a collective goal. Because independently hiring a lobbyist isn't necessarily something you can do. How quickly do these groups move? How easy has it been for them to make a decision and decide how to proceed? How easy is it for them to jump on the phone with a different partner or colleague? How often are they being used as a representative for the industry at different association events? And how do they work with their other associations? These are all questions you can ask and ask of others. Have associations, some associations will recommend an association to you if you're not the right fit for them. This is the time to ask those questions. There's nothing wrong with asking those questions. I listed a number of associations here that I've, worked with or know a number of partners that have been very open to collaboration and conversations. I just listed them there. I frankly didn't have room for all their logos. But there's many associations, and again, many more that are emerging. So as a result, take the time, do some due diligence. I'm always happy to have calls if you have any questions about CABA or anyone else. One thing I will say for our coalition, we are federally focused. This is our primary mission. I'm based in DC primarily so I can help with the education component and be on site if needed to walk them through everything from the food science and supply chain side to the finished product and who the demographic is. And then, all of our dues go to our operating expenses and our lobby firms. We have 2 lobby firms. They are fantastic. We have 4 representatives that work on the Hill with us. They have been incredibly impactful and insightful and helpful in us in crafting our strategy, but also with working with others. And a number of our partners in alcohol, whether it's wholesale or service providers or retail, also work with some of these groups. So they're able to really collaborate well with others. It's important to understand, where your dollars are going and how they're being utilized. So ask those questions when you talk to different associations, most of which should be able to give you a very clear picture of where their dollars go, how they operate, and how they all collaborate and work together. In an effort of, we are a little bit over here, so I'm already over, and I apologize for that. Did want to take a look at questions here. I'll try and get through as much as possible. Okay, sorry, George. I hope you could hear me because I'm just seeing this question now, so I apologize. I have heard about rescheduling to Schedule 3. Rescheduling is great for pharma and elimination of 280E for the marijuana groups. However, it does not necessarily impact the hemp industry. So the intoxicating hemp products that are looking to be sold in a Total Wine or Circle K, that will not be given to us through a Schedule 3 opportunity. Bo, your question on what are the chances that the states are allowed to ignore these laws similar to Schedule 1 marijuana ignored at the federal level. Can't really speak to that. I think that's going to be really tough. I think a lot of states, particularly because some of them have that default for the Controlled Substances Act, that is, I don't know why I can't say substances today. I think because of that, it automatically triggers. So some states might have conflicting regulations. So there might be some issues there. But I absolutely think that there will be pushback from some states, and there potentially could be an opportunity for that. Ideally, we would prefer to obviously not work in gray area. And if we can create some consistency at the national level, I think that would be ideal for us to continue building moving forward. Regarding the new law, do we expect this to be a sort of de facto Cole memo, despite the new Fed regs? So same sort of thing. It as of right now, it's hard to say if we will see businesses being raided or whatnot. I can say, even in the marijuana industry, where there are sometimes some very clear regulations at the state level, where we have seen confusion amongst regulatory bodies, where we have had problems just created from people not being sure what regulation that they really need to be reporting to or acting on. So I think there might be some issues there, but I think it's still early to tell. And I think it is also going to be based on the conversations and education that we continue doing at the state level. Yes. So Bo Whitney of Whitney Economics has created a THC beverage report. We have utilized it. If you have attended some of our things in the past, we have, hold on one second. We have utilized it in the past in terms of promoting the growth of the industry using the numbers in some of our educational material. We've used it in at some of our events where we are promoting the category itself. And it's been incredibly helpful. So Bo, thank you for that if you're still on here. It gives a really good overview of the total market. It also includes the supply chain side as well. So there's a lot of really healthy information in that. And I know that Bo is also looking to develop another study and follow up. There's obviously this market changes so fast. So it is a free report. It's a good overview. Reach out to myself. I'm happy to direct you over to Bo or to Whitney Economics directly. But it is an incredibly useful tool if you're looking to educate others, and particularly looking to utilize it for lobbying or any other educational purposes. How do you propose engaging in the descheduling, rescheduling conversation? This is tough. I do believe that rescheduling is a step in the right direction. If we were going the other direction, that would obviously be very problematic. I think descheduling is, because we've had delays so long for rescheduling and we know there's still interest there, I feel like descheduling is too big of an ask to happen in the next year. So I think one thing our groups need to really think about is what is achievable in the next year and what's likely, and really be honest with ourselves about what the chances are of something like that. I think we all believe in a one plant solution. I heard someone recently use the term one molecule solution when talking about the intoxicating problems with D9. And I think we all agree that the hemp versus marijuana conversation and debate is temporary. But in terms of a quick fix that is really pushing us towards descheduling, I think that's going to be really, really tough right now. Yes, I've actually connected with Jeff over at the National Hemp Association and pushing progress framework. We recently received that documentation and are looking at it as well. I think there's a number of groups that they can be working with that we can connect them with as well. So I think that will be something that we see in the future. Timeline for setting up the foundational strategy for language and working on that versus working on the implementation. So I would estimate that we will have a mapped out strategy component built out early December. I think right now there's a lot of conversations and we are wrangling the allies and having conversations with groups that again have lobbied against us that we think we might be able to get working with us. So I think that will dictate some of the times. In terms of some of the bills that have been introduced by reps, like Griffith and Wyden and those groups, those if there's already support behind them, working within those frameworks can be extremely beneficial so that we are not tied to a renewable bill. That's obviously the goal for us, is to not be tied to a renewable bill. So we will continue working on those. I think, like I mentioned earlier, the Griffith and Wyden bills seem to be similar in many, many ways, which I think gives me hope that there's a chance for a lot of collaboration. Good recommendation to create a membership for groups that are a little bit smaller, maybe a nonprofit. We have actually considered, and I think we're going to make an adjustment to the website for one-time donations as well. So I think we will be able to do that as well. And then I see the descheduling question again. So obviously, I just think, obviously, would love that. I just don't know if that's something that's feasible and attainable within the year. And I think those are questions and conversations that are happening with a lot of different groups. I'm not going to speak necessarily on behalf of any of the attorney generals per se. Look, I think if you looked at the attorney general letter, 97% of that letter, a lot of us probably agree with. They talked a lot about synthetics and products that were marketed to kids. The last line was actually the only issue. So I don't know the mentality behind the attorney generals that got behind it, but the letter itself had a lot of things that a lot of us align with, which I think causes some confusion sometimes. And I know from when people first read it, they were like, "Oh, this letter's not problematic. It's, asking to clean up the marketplace and yada yada yada." And I was like, "Yeah, but that last line is pretty bad." So I know a lot of people, initially read it and didn't think that that letter was, necessarily doing the damage that it did. Obviously, there's a lot of conversation. There were a lot of other letters that combated that to a degree, but certainly problematic to, I think educating the attorney generals and having them understand that synthetic, that's the other thing that I've noticed in certain materials I've seen. Oftentimes synthetic is made to sound like it's synonymous with intoxicating, and that is not the case. Synthetic material, I mean, we've all had the conversation where vitamin C, most of the vitamin C that we consume on a regular basis through vitamins and supplements is synthetic. Synthetic's been made into a really bad word because there have been other cannabinoids that have been created that are extremely potent and put in copycat products. And as a result, synthetics has gotten a really negative name to it. I think what has been difficult for a lot of groups to understand, including members and staffers, and I don't blame them, is understanding the difference between naturally occurring, naturally derived, which is different than naturally occurring, converted material or semi-synthetic, and then fully synthetic, and understanding what cannabinoids fall under each of those categories. I think that is something that is difficult when you have so many issues that you are trying to tackle at the federal level, and hemp is one of them. That is a very difficult thing, I think, for them to sometimes, wrap their head around. So, in terms of advocates for the ban, I think a lot of those advocates for the ban, the question is, who is McConnell listening to and who are the advocates behind asking for a ban? There were a number of groups that lobbied against us, a number of which wrote letters, signed letters, and submitted those. And I wouldn't even say some of them were lobbying against us. I think some of them were lobbying for public safety. For example, the Consumer Brand Association group, their letter was strictly about copycat products because brands like Kit Kat and Blow Pop, I don't know why I can't think of other candy right now, Nerds, they don't want to see products marketed like Skittles that have THC in them and are being sold to kids. So like, I think there was a lot of that weighed heavily. We've obviously heard that, McConnell didn't intend to legalize intoxicating cannabinoids from hemp with the 2018 Farm Bill. That was not his intent. So I think that, as a result, he wants to correct that and clean up the market. And again, I think it's going to come down to education. There were some groups that lobbied on the Hill against us pretty aggressively to close the loophole. And, we'll just continue to educate and try to see if we can identify what their issues were so that we can provide solutions to those. Because ultimately, we can't just keep killing each other's initiatives. We have to think about meeting people in the middle and compromising, whether it is a member of Congress or staff, um, or it's another association that might have a compelling argument or a reason that they feel a certain way. I think there are ways that we can meet them in the middle and come up with compromise that protects the consumer and provides safe access, but also allows our businesses to continue to grow in a safe and regulated environment. So the other question is about collaborating with the regulated cannabis industry in addition to ALC. There are some groups like NCIA that have actually also supported hemp. So there are a number of groups on the cannabis side, as well as some MSOs that have started working with us, particularly on creating a low dose channel. So I do believe that there is going to be more alignment there. I think that, as we know, there are some sticking points with various um, form factors and I think dosages. So I think, again, it comes down to compromise, but I do think that that is possible for us to be working with some of the cannabis groups as well. Um, while I know there have been a number of conversations behind closed doors about what the alignment looks like between some of these associations and alcohol and cannabis and or I should say, I guess, marijuana and hemp groups. I'm not going to speak to those just yet because I don't think everyone has gotten the chance to talk to their associations about the compromises that they are open to. And I think it's really important that everyone hears from their association first and foremost on what those compromises may or may not look like. Do love the one plant framework. That's also, a number of the people here have submitted that question. Um, Whether or not it happens in a year is the biggest issue because I think ultimately that is just the hardest issue is we are dealing with a definition, an arbitrary definition. Do I think that in the future the pathways will be defined based on dosage versus hemp versus marijuana? Absolutely. But I just don't know what can be accomplished in the year. And I think getting someone to completely deschedule or push for a one plant solution might just be a lot to take on and chew on and get done within the year. So I think we have to be cognizant of the timeline almost more than anything else too. Sales reps and bud tenders, I mean, I think a big part of how they can get involved in this fight is education. So sales reps explaining to their partners and strategic partners, as well as, if they're talking to consumers at events about how these products could go away. I think there were a lot of brands that did some really good consumer facing campaigns to get letters sent to Congress and to their representatives. Those things can continue to grow, and I think will continue to emerge and grow over time and will be really impactful, and again just offer another layer of support because it provides air cover for anyone who wants to say, look, I evaluated the market, I looked at my consumer base, the consumers want this product, they want it regulated, they want safe access. These groups are willing to compromise. They're asking to be sold and distributed through trusted retailers and licensed wholesalers and taxed a certain way. All of that legitimizes us. And if consumers are asking for the product and they want these products to be safe and tested and accessible, there's only really one way to go about that. Jason, I know you and I have connected on a number of things. The comment was about research-based applications and preclinical trials. Would love to collaborate and touch base on something that we can create that might create some more confidence. I know I've shared a lot of the consistent PK study data that's available for beverage in terms of showing consistent onset and offset and accurate dosage. Those sorts of things have been really beneficial and I think um, helpful in general for staffers to be able to go back to their bosses and explain to what's going on, but also when they're drafting legislation. So I think that would be really helpful. Would love to connect more with you on that, Jason, and see what see if we can collect those resources together and put together maybe a master study of some sort that will help us get a clearer pathway forward with a number of regulators. And look, we're going to need regulators on board. There's no bypassing the FDA here, guys. Like the FDA will always have a say over certain ingredients, process, things like that. they might not oversee intoxicating products. Maybe that's TTB in the future. But at the end of the day, like, we need buy-in from all those key stakeholders. And it's important that we listen to the feedback that we get from them. And the more research and data we can provide, the better. I think I got to everyone's questions. Okay. If you guys have anything else for me, I appreciate you guys all joining. Feel free to email me. I believe I had shared, I'll share one more time in case. Oh, already was. My email address. Feel free to contact me if you have any questions about what the plans are. More information will be coming out in the next couple of weeks. The main point of this was really to make sure that everyone could have confidence that we are collaborating and working with other partners, that there are resources available to you if you're looking to join associations or hire lobbyists. People will help you do this. We all want to make sure we are successful. So have no problems. Don't have any hesitation to reach out for assistance and help. All right, guys, I will let you go. Thank you for hanging in there a little bit later with me. Have a great rest of your day. And yeah, keep fighting the good fight.